Today's topic is talking about climate change in the English language classroom. English language in this sense, meaning like English as a second language or English as a foreign language. So, this is part of a series of vlogs that I decided I was going to start doing a month or so ago. In which every 2 weeks I was going to try and push myself to kind of vlog about an issue related to climate change. So it's been about 2 weeks since the last one, so I'm due for another one. In this case, I'm going to be talking about something that with a rather narrow focus, arguably. So I'm going to be talking about, this is going to be of interest to people who are concerned about climate change that work as English language teachers. So the population as a whole, arguably a narrow subsection of it, but then again, the English language teaching industry is huge around the world, so there are actually quite a few of us, aren't there? And if you've been teaching English for any length of time, you know that a lot of the textbooks already talk about global warming or climate change or environmental issues. So many of the major textbooks already published have either one lesson or several lessons or a whole unit kind of devoted to talking about global warming, climate change, environmental issues, what we can do about it. It's a very trendy topic in English language textbooks published nowadays. I've been teaching English for a long time in a number of different countries in Asia, taught English in Japan and Cambodia, and I'm currently teaching in Vietnam. And I have gotten to the point where I am sick to death about talking about global warming in the English language classroom. It just pops up so many times in so many textbooks and so many lessons. And I get the sense that a lot of the students, especially kind of teenagers, are also sick to death about talking about this topic. And at the same time, I'm somebody who is very concerned about climate change and feels that this is a topic worthy of being discussed. So therein lies the dilemma, and that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Is kind of the benefits of talking about climate change in the English language classroom, balanced against what I think maybe a lot of teachers and students are feeling, which is maybe climate change topic fatigue maybe, or environmentally themed lessons topic fatigue. Right, so where to start with this one? I feel like a lot of the textbooks I've been teaching out of have had at least kind of one unit devoted to environmental issues. And at schools where the kids study for several years, each level of the textbook will have at least one unit or one lesson based around an environmental theme. So by the time the kids have been kind of, by the time they get to level 4 or level 5 or however these textbooks are sequenced, they've just been studying so many lessons based around climate change, and their eyes kind of glaze over when they get to them. In addition, some of the schools I've taught at, some of the schools have been pushing environmentally themed lessons. There was a school I taught at in Cambodia, which I'm fairly sure they've stopped doing this now, but when I first started doing it, teaching there, every term, and a term would be about 10 weeks, there would be a mandatory Green Day lesson. There would be like a Green Day, they call it Green Day, where you had to teach an environmental themed lesson. The lessons were all pre-made. And it was one of these top-down things, so it was mandated by the management. The teachers hated doing it because the lessons were often dry and boring. And the students really hated doing it, again, because the lessons were often dry and boring, and because a lot of the students were teenagers, so they would have preferred to be talking about other topics. So it was, one of those things where I questioned whether it was doing any good, and yet it obviously came from people with the best of intentions. People who had kind of the same concerns that I did. I mean, I guess this gets into maybe a broader issue generally, which is how to maybe convert people or get people more aware of climate change issues without getting preachy, which is a tricky issue. But there's another factor in teaching ESL, English as a second or foreign language. And that is, I think it's fairly widely acknowledged now that people tend to learn best when they're reading or listening from texts or listening tracks that are inherently interesting to them. So for example, if you have a group of teenagers who are obsessed with superheroes or K-pop or whatever the kids are into these days, comic books or fantasy stories or something like that, that content is going to be the ideal sort of content to get them to learn English through. And the English language can be used around any sort of content, and you can pull out the grammar points and the vocabulary to a large extent. I mean, obviously the vocabulary is going to be topic specific, but any kind of broad vocabulary would kind of pop up in any topic. And that would be, I think, ideal if your only focus were on their language learning. If you are talking about a topic that's not inherently interesting to them, that's not going to be ideal from a language learning standpoint. So if you have a group of teenagers who are bored by talking about environmental issues or recycling or global warming, that's not going to be ideal for their language learning. And yet, if doing these lessons ultimately made some sort of positive long-term impact on people's environmental awareness, it may well be worth boring them for 45 minutes or 90 minutes or however long the class is. It may be worth kind of sacrificing some language gains or some sort of engagement in order to focus on a message that's worthwhile focusing on. Again, this comes back to the issue of kind of how much good does this kind of overt education do. But arguably it does some good. And, especially in some developing countries where the public awareness could be better. I mean, I think in the US we're kind of saturated a bit with information about global warming. There are some people who've reacted negatively against that information and have chosen to disagree with it, but you could never say they weren't aware of it. Whereas in kind of developing countries like Cambodia and Vietnam, there may be more of a public awareness issue. A story that a number of Vietnamese people have told me, not so much a story as maybe an anecdote or something, is that children are now getting a lot of environmental education in their schools in Vietnam, because this is something that Vietnam has started doing, which is something their parents' generation did not get. People who are adults in Vietnam now did not get environmental education. So as a result, the children are becoming very upset when they see their parents litter, or when they see their parents, throw stuff away in the wrong recycling bin or something like that. So that's an indication that this kind of education is having a positive effect and that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. I mean, obviously, to see the long-term effect of this, we'll have to wait until these children kind of grow into adults, and this is just kind of anecdotal evidence anyways. But yeah, it indicates to me that maybe there's some sort of positive element from this. On the other hand, the students who study at language schools, again, the textbook, if you're studying out of a series of textbooks and they all have a global warming lesson, it does kind of fatigue the students. At one point, I got so sick of doing global warming lessons, I kind of announced to my colleagues, I said, I think global warming is the major issue of our generation, but I will never teach it in the English language classroom again. I'm just done doing global warming lessons in the English language classroom. Which was kind of one of those statements you make when you're hot-headed because you just come off doing like a really boring global warming lesson from a textbook. And then I've calmed down and I've since retracted that somewhat. But it is, yeah, it is maybe an issue kind of hitting these things too hard, especially because I think a lot of us are feeling like I'm feeling, where, okay, I know it's a problem. I'm already stressed out about it. Like, I'm already super worried about it. Tell me what we can do about it now. Or, tell me that there's a solution. Or, point me in the direction of how to solve this rather than constantly just stressing me out about it, which a lot of the lessons do kind of tend to do. Anyways, I've been thinking about this the past few days, and the issue of whether or not to do more global warming, climate change related lessons in the classroom, or to do less of them. And I think I've maybe hit upon a compromise that I could keep me happy or could kind of salve my conscience, which is to create extra materials based reading and listening texts based around climate change issues that could be done as optional homework for students that are interested. So on this YouTube channel, I've been trying to create listening exercises for ESL students. With what degree of success is not for me to judge, but that's been my ambition. And so far I've been focusing on stories because I feel that stories are the ideal vehicle for engaging people. Or making the language interesting, and if you make the language interesting, that increases the acquisition. But I'd like to add to this a series of listening lessons based on global warming topics, which I will be doing on this YouTube channel. And I've already got like 1,000,001 things I'm doing here. So progress on this will be a little bit slow, but I'd like to set myself the following goal. I'd like to create one of these every 4 months. It will involve kind of researching a topic, maybe, writing something up on it, and then with these reading and listening lessons I've been doing, I've been trying to come up with questions to answer and an answer sheet and kind of vocabulary work, and trying to do 2 versions of the video, one slow version and one fast version, and kind of all this stuff. So I do put some work into these things, which is one of the reasons it does take me some time. And I've already I've already got a lot of things I'm doing in my life, but you don't want to hear how busy I am, huh? So I'll skip that part. So once every 4 months, I think, is going to be a reasonable goal for me. I don't think I could do any more than that at the moment. But at the same time, that would be kind of 3 of these created a year. If I stick with this for 5 years, that would be 15 of these, which is 15 would be kind of a decent bank of materials to create over a few years. Actually, maybe it's considering the time factor, maybe that's not such an impressive bank of materials. But that's what I'm going to aim for. I don't know, I can reevaluate later if I decide I get more time or I want to devote more time to this. So yeah, sometime in the next 4 months, I'm going to have a listening for ESL students exercise about an environmental climate change issue. And when I do get around to creating that, that'll take the place of the global warming vlog for that week. I've tried to do these global warming vlogs bi-weekly, but it'll take the place of whatever is due that month. One of them. Sorry, I'm recording late at night and I'm tired, and I'm becoming incoherent. I think I've said everything I want to say, actually. Basically, yeah, from now, I'll be creating listening lessons, goal of once every 4 months, which I'll put with the rest of my reading and listening material for ESL students that can be done as optional homework, as a resource for either teachers or students. Hopefully it'll be something useful. I'm doing my best on these, but I'm limited by the limits of my natural ability. But that'll be the goal.